What is up, clean freaks and filthy friends alike? Filthy Dan coming at you once again for another film discussion. And tonight we're going to be talking about what is arguably Wes Craven's best and most iconic film, and that is A Nightmare on Elm Street, which hit theaters in 1984, and it practically saved New Line Cinema from bankruptcy, cemented Wes Craven as one of the grand masters of the horror genre, introduced to the world the quintessential 80s boogeyman slash pop culture icon, Freddy Krueger, and of course it gave us Johnny Depp. And for those of you who don't know, A Nightmare on Elm Street is an undisputable classic, and that is to say the very least. Its success would go on to spawn a franchise, which I will be covering over the next couple of weeks or couple of days, depending on how fast I decide to crank these reviews out. And when you watch this film, it's really easy to see why A Nightmare on Elm Street has gone on to become a fan favorite for almost 40 years now. I mean, with the special effects, which were done practically, and the elaborate idea of a slasher who comes at you not in a wooded area, not in a haunted house, but he comes at you through your dreams. And that really got people thinking, I'm sure, back in the day. And I know for a fact that it scared the shit out of people back then. And a lot of the scare factor, I think, does have to do with just that, because the inevitability of having to go to sleep makes a character like Freddy all the more terrifying because, again, that's where he comes at you. And if you've seen this film, you already know that. Um, A Nightmare on Elm Street follows Nancy and her friends as they're stalked in their dreams by a dream killer who was a former child killer named Freddy Krueger, and the police kind of ignore everything that's going on. When the first character dies, her boyfriend is actually the initial suspect. And the police ignore the idea that, oh, y'all are being haunted in your dreams, because who would really believe that, honestly? And well, Freddy starts killing off Nancy's friends, and she has to go into her dreams herself to vanquish Freddy. And she's going in there to fight him at the risk of never waking up again herself. And that's obviously the general plot of it. There's a lot of really cool shit in this film. Like there's on the practical effects side, Freddy's burn makeup is freaking amazing looking. It's probably not the most realistic burn victim, but he's definitely the most recognizable burn victim in cinema. Um, his glove is definitely the most iconic weapon that has ever been seen in a horror film. Definitely the most iconic weapon in cinema outside of the lightsaber, but that's for a whole nother discussion. And for the effects, one practical effect that really worked in this film, and everybody talks about it, is when Freddy comes through the wall when Nancy's sleeping. He just presses through the wall, and it's like a real kind of mushy effect. It was done just by stretching a piece of spandex over a hole in the wall. Real cool shit done for what, 30 cents. Um, I really like the Janet Lee bait and switch that they do in this film with the character Tina, who we meet in the first scene. She's running through her nightmares, and you're thinking, okay, this is the girl we see first. She's going to be our main character. And it sets her up to be just that. And she's killed off within the first half hour. And that kind of fucked me up as a kid. I wasn't expecting that. And this is actually the second of the big three that I was introduced to as a kid. And my parents actually owned the first two Nightmare on Elm Streets on VHS at that time. And the imagery of the box art freaked me out for both films. I didn't watch them until about second grade, so about 8 years old. And I waited to watch them, and it freaked me out all the more just because at the time we were living on a street called Elm Court, so you can imagine what that does to a kid's mind. Anyway, excuse me. Like, the characters in this are really great, and that's something that I think has always been a strong point in Wes Craven's films. The likability and relatability and believability of his characters. They just have a really good chemistry, and especially the teen cast in this film. They're very well developed for the most part. You don't really want any of them to die. And again, they're still pretty damn relatable all these years later. Another thing this film has going for it, in my opinion, is the seamlessness from the dream world and the real world. Characters could be in the real world, and you almost don't even notice it when a dream sequence breaks out because there's a seamlessness to it. And especially when you're watching it for the first time, you're like, what the fuck am I seeing? But back to the characters, Nancy's parents are really interesting. Like, her dad's a workaholic police lieutenant, played by John motherfucking Saxon, mind you. And he's too busy with work to be any help to his daughter or her friends, the whole situation. And he believes that Tina's boyfriend has fucking lost his mind. And Nancy's mom, on the other hand, also is not too keen to believe her. And rather than being any help, she's going to be drinking her ass off, just boozing away. And as important to the story as Nancy's mom is, she's probably the character that I feel least fits into the film. Because, like, honestly, she looks like she walked off the set of a damn soap opera. And I don't know. She just doesn't work for me on every level. But she's very important to the plot, so I'll give her that. And Nancy's parents, and all the Elm Street parents for that matter, were part of a lynch mob that killed Freddy back in the day, creating him to become this dream demon that we all know and love him to be nowadays. And when Nancy starts dreaming about him, you can kind of see the effect that it takes on her parents when she starts to describe him. Like, you just see a look dawn upon both the parents' faces, and you see how Nancy's mom really starts to drink heavier as the film progresses, just because of the whole Nancy knows about Fred Krueger, and it's really a lot in the mind going on in this film. And let's see what else. Yeah, the dream sequences again are really fucking amazing. Like, they're kind of realistic. Like, when you fall asleep, a lot of our dreams are kind of intertwining with reality and what we've thought about over the previous day and whatnot. That kind of ties in with the dreams in this film. They're based in a realistic setting, and they're not too far-fetched. There's no elaborate set pieces, which we'll come to see in the later sequels. But yeah, they're really really fucking amazing in this. I want to say the final showdown in this film is chock full of booby traps after Nancy pulls Freddy into the real world out of her dream. It's a really amazing sequence because Wes Craven was in his booby trap phase at this point of his career. So Nancy kind of pulls some Home Alone shit on Freddy. And I think the highlight of that is the fire stunt, where she sets him ablaze in the basement. And I always like stunts like that because you can always see the fire suit, and it's just that old little hole they poke in the effect. I always kind of get a kick out of that. And it's a real amazing stunt because I think, don't quote me on it, it may or may not have held the record for the longest one-shot burn stunt at that time. But yeah, she pulls Freddy out of her dream, and she's trying to get her dad to come across the street to her house to help her, and goes upstairs, kills the mom, sucks her into the bed through like some weird ass fucking lifting mechanism, I believe is what it was, obviously behind the scenes. But yeah, that was always an eerie shot, just the mom's skeleton being pulled into the mattress. And that's not to be confused with Johnny Depp's death scene in that film, which was something I'll get back to in a minute. Or no, fuck it, we'll go to that right now. Johnny Depp's death scene in this film is one of the more iconic parts of it. And that's saying a lot because this is an iconic film already. Like he gets sucked into his mattress and the blood fountain just comes out, and they shot that in a rotating room, and they actually used the same room earlier for Tina's death. And the blood is just coming out of Johnny Depp's mattress, and it's just like like more blood than is in the human body, I'm sure. But what they did is they flipped the room upside down to get that shot, and it just kind of made for a really out of this world sequence. Um, Tina's death, she's being dragged along the wall, like up the wall, and what they did is they just fucking drilled all the fucking furnitures down. Real amazing stuff. And anyway, the final sequence of the film, after Freddy's been vanquished, Nancy's outside with her mom, all their friends are shown to still be alive. Now, what Wes Craven was intending was for there to be a happy ending, and Robert Shea, being the kind of I need money producer that he was, decided, no, what we need to do is tack on a scary ending. So what they do is get a blow up doll of Ronnie Blakely and pull her ass through the little window on the door, and it's just a real shitty effect. I wish they'd have gone with the happy ending, showing that the whole film, in fact, was a nightmare. But hey, Bob Shea needed money and he wanted a franchise, so that's what we got out of that. I like the movie either way. Now, as always, I'm going to discuss my favorite kill, and this one is tough, and it's really between Tina and Glenn. Like, the other deaths in the film are just subpar for me, but between Tina and Glenn, both kills are really iconic. They're probably two of the most iconic kills in horror, but I gotta go with my gut, and my gut says Johnny Depp's death when he gets pulled into the mattress and the blood fountain occurs. Just when his mom walks in and just sees that, and she's freaking out, and after he's dead and you see the blood just dripping from the ceiling into a little bucket, like just the after effects of that one, I think really tack on something interesting that you will remember. And it was a hard one to pick between those two. I almost went with Tina, but on a whim I had to go with Glenn. And for the Smutty Sightings, this is different because we don't actually see anything really, but we hear earlier on in the film the character Rod and Tina are, getting it on upstairs, and we only hear it. And we see the pillow talk afterward. That I'll throw that in on here. And also the iconic bathtub scene, which I neglected to mention earlier. But we see a tasteful amount of side boob on Nancy's stunt double. Like when she gets pulled under the tub and you just kind of see her drowning. Just a nice, tasteful bit, No nip, just side boob. And also, seeing how this is a Nightmare on Elm Street review series, I have 3 new bonus materials to tack on here. First, the favorite dream sequence. This is another tough one because there are so many iconic dream sequences in this film. Be it the showdown, Tina's nightmare at the beginning, the nightmare resulting in Tina's death. But I gotta go with the one that occurs after Tina dies, where it's at the school, and this is probably the most memorable one. Nancy's sitting in her classroom and she sees Tina in a body bag coming up to the class. Nancy's in the middle of an English lecture. She just sees Tina in a body bag, calling for her. She follows her out into the hall, and the body bag's getting dragged down the hall. She runs after it, bumps into the hall monitor. Where's your pass? Screw your pass. No running in the hallway. I fucking love that shit. But the other 2 features, we have spotting Shay. This is a fun one because there's actually 2 marks on it for this film. We have Bob Shay, the producer of the film. He offers his voice in a voice-only cameo, reporting the death of Tina on the news the morning after. Right before Nancy goes to school, you hear him talking on the news. I only noticed that about 2 viewings ago, I think. And this might be cheating, but Bob's sister Lynn is in the film, and she worked on a lot of the early New Line films with Bob Shaye, obviously. But she has the classic role of Nancy's English teacher. She has probably about a minute of screen time in this film, but it's an iconic role, one she'll always be remembered for. And then this is the last of the new features. I call it the Freddy Quipper, which is basically my favorite line spoken by Freddy. There's two real iconic lines in this one. One being, "I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy." But that's not the one I'm picking. My favorite Freddy quip in the original Nightmare on Elm Street is going to be during Tina's nightmare when she's walking down the alley and she sees Freddy for the first real time. She says, "Please, God." And Freddy, being the smartass he is, puts the glove up to his face. "This is God." One of Freddy's best lines, not only in this film, but in the whole franchise, I'm going to bet. And that pretty much closes up my Nightmare on Elm Street review. I don't know why, but I feel like I need to say, if you haven't seen this movie, go out and see it. If you don't own it, buy the damn movie. If you haven't seen it, I don't know why you've made it this far into the video. And if you have made it this far into the video, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. Start a dialogue. What's your favorite thing in A Nightmare on Elm Street? And remember to stay filthy.